Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. Thanks for tuning in. If you could hit like, hit subscribe, share this out, really helps out the channel. As I continue to study macro, I've realized that a lot of macroeconomic questions come down to one question, right? So if you're thinking, are we going to go into deflation? Are we going to keep having inflation? It really comes down to one question. Is the Fed telling the truth? Is the Federal Reserve telling the truth? Because they're telling you what they're going to do. And the question is, why don't people believe them? Well, they've pivoted in the past, right? In 2019, Jerome Powell said he was going to raise interest rates, and the reverse repo crisis happened, and pivot, right? Pivot, like in Friends. But the real question is the Federal Reserve telling the truth? Because it is different this time for a lot of reasons. We have inflation, we have massive amounts of debt federally, but is the Federal Reserve telling the truth? And so, one thing I've been contemplating over and over again is the Fed raises interest rates. When the Fed raises interest rates, that causes the interest on treasuries, especially when we issue new ones or refinance them, to go up. Translation, that causes government expenditures to go up significantly because those treasuries amount to 31 trillion, and we have deficit spending every year. So, will the Fed continue to do this? Well, this exact question was asked to Neel Kashkari, the head of the Minneapolis Fed. So, number one, power move, killer boots in a suit. Like to see that. But somebody asked him this exact question. Is the pivot point less about a 2% inflation and more about government debt? Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, Neil Dan Nelson, welcome to Brookings. Pleasure listening to you. The last time the Fed was able to combat this high of inflation was back in the 1970s, early 80s. And at that time, we obviously didn't have 30 trillion in debt. And my question is, with a Fed funds rate of at this point over 5%, is the Fed concerned that maintaining that high of an interest rate is going to cause problems in servicing 30 trillion in debt? And is the pivot less about reaching a 2% inflation target and more about an inability to service that debt?
Good question. It is the Treasury's job and the Congress's job to decide how to finance the government, how much they want to tax, how much they want to issue debt, how much they want to spend, and what they want to spend on. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to achieve our dual mandate goals. So I can tell you, we do not contemplate what our interest rate decisions mean for the U.S. Treasury or for Congress and their fiscal spending plans. We view our job as to achieve our dual mandate goals. So I think people say, what might drive the pivot at some point in the future? At some point, the unemployment rate, so we have two sides of our dual mandate, inflation and maximum employment. At some point, they will come into attention. So let's say if I thought that the lowest unemployment rate, I think it's lower than this, but let's just say I thought it was 4%. Imagine a rough way of looking at this. If we were missing our unemployment target by 50%, we'd have a 6% unemployment rate relative to 4. And if we were missing our inflation target by 50%, we'd have a 3% inflation rate relative to 2. So at some point, these two goals are going to come into tension. We are a long, long, long way away from that right now. So that's why any talk of a pivot is entirely premature right now.
Okay, so the question is he telling the truth? Do you guys believe him? I think it's an interesting response for sure. And let me translate what he's saying for you if you didn't quite understand. Federal Reserve is independent. Who cares what the government's doing? They have to work with the reality on the ground, which is what the Federal Reserve is doing. Do you believe that? I don't know if I do. I think the Federal Reserve acquiesces to political pressure eventually, because how exactly does Jerome Powell get that job? At the behest of whom again? Exactly. So, and you saw in my video the other day, Pocahontas was tweeting about this, like, "Hey, you're gonna lower jobs, if you keep fighting inflation. Is it gonna cause people to lose their jobs? Yeah, that's the reality on the ground. But the truth of the matter is, what's causing people to lose their jobs is massive federal deficits. Anyways, I thought that was very interesting. And if you think about it, the big question is, is the Fed telling the truth? And will the Fed acquiesce to political pressure? Because Congress and the government, free, easy, cheap money all the time, yay. Because the next administration will deal with it. That's Congress. And then now we have inflation. So how do we deal with it is the real question. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See you all in the next one. Peace.